So far, we have worked on the header and we have our main navigation menu. So before we proceed and start working on the header again, I am going to take a pause here and I am going to explain a certain concepts about the CSS, and I am going to explain a few concepts about the inline block and the float left and the display flex. So let's go to our CodePen. In CodePen, I'm going to create a markup very similar to our navigation menu. So I will have a UL, and inside the UL I will have the list item, and let's say I want to have 5 list items. Let me increase the font size a little bit. So we will have the UL and we will have 5 list items inside, and inside every list item we will have a link. That means the A tag. After this I hit the tab and you see that my structure is, my HTML markup is already created. So I have a UL and I have 5 list items and I have the links. I'm going to have the first link called home, the second one called recipes, third one let's say categories, the fourth one will be about, and the fifth one let's call it contact. Okay, so far we have 5 list items here and they are now getting displayed here on the bottom of the screen. So you see that every list item is basically a block level element. And what exactly is a block element is something, block element is something that takes the complete width. So every block element will come on its own line. That is the reason all the list items are one below the others. Every list item takes the complete width available to the list item. So what we want is, we don't want the menu to be displayed like this. We want the menu to be displayed something where all the list items are displayed side by side, very similar to what we saw here. So what we are going to do, we are going to see the first way how we can achieve this. So we are going to come to CSS and we will start writing our CSS. Let's give a class to our unordered list and we will give class equals, and we will call it main navigation. Right, let's save this and we will write the first style. So let's say the first thing I want to do is to get rid of this bullets. So we will have UL. To get rid of the bullets we will write list style none, and instead of UL I will give the class that I have assigned to it. So instead of UL I will call it dot main dash navigation, right? And I save it, and now you see that the bullets that were appearing over here, they all disappeared. Now what do I want is, I want all my list items to appear next to each other. Instead of all the list items appearing in their own single line, I want all the list items to appear next to each other. So for that I am going to have dot main navigation. I will call it main navigation, and then the li, because the li, that means the list item, appears under the UL or under the main navigation. So I will give dot main navigation and then the list item, and then I am going to give it a class of not the class but the style of display inline block. And as soon as I do that, you see what happens, that all the list items that were appearing one below the other, now they are appearing, all the list items are appearing side by side. So what exactly happened here? Here, instead of making the list items display as a block, I gave it a property that will make the list items display as an inline block. So it will, what exactly is the inline block means, I can also give it a property of inline. It will be the same. When I save it, you will see that it remains the same, but if I give it inline block, I can apply some of the styles that are related only to the block level elements. So like padding, like the margin, all of these styles, they will work with the block level elements. So the same styles I can apply to the inline block elements as well, right? Okay. So this is the first way of making it appear side by side, all the list items side by side. This is only one way of doing that, but there are other ways too. So we will look into the other ways as well. But before I do that, let's do one thing. First of all, you see that all the list items, they are appearing next to each other, but still there is a small gap here. This usually happens every time you are using the property display inline block. You will see that all the list items, they will start appearing side by side, but between them there will be like a small gap, and you don't really understand what that small gap is all about. In order for you to get rid of like these small gaps, all you have to do is go to the parent element. In my case, the parent element is the UL or the main navigation. The UL has a class of main navigation. I will go to the main navigation element and I will give it a font size of 0. But you have to know one thing: as soon as I give a font size of 0 to it, all the list items will start disappearing, because they will not appear at all, because the same property is going to be applied to the child elements as well. So let's see. If I give a font size of 0, you see that now all the list items, they just disappeared. Why? Because I gave a font size of 0 to the main navigation, that means the UL. It also applied the same font size to all the list items and all the links inside, but I don't really want that. So what I have to do, I will come to the LI and I will give it a font size of 18 pixels, let's say. As soon as I give it a style of 18 pixels, you see that now the list items will start appearing fine. And you will notice one more difference. Now there is no gap between any list item. You see why it happened? It is because of the font size 0. As soon as I remove the font size 0 property, you see that there is a small gap that will start appearing between the list items. In order for me to have like no gap between the list items, I have to specify this property of font size 0, which will make all the gaps disappear. Fine. Now I am going to come to the links, because all the links by default, they have an underline, so I have to get rid of this underline. So I am going to go and I am going to specify the link, but this link is inside the main navigation. So I will do dot main dash navigation and A. That means all the links inside the main navigation. So that means all the links over here, here, all the links here, they all appear under the main navigation, because the main navigation is a parent for both list items and also for the links. So I am going to give it a general style rule of all the links that appear under the main navigation. I want to have text decoration. There is a property called text decoration and I will give it none. As soon as I do that, you see that all the underlines, they will just disappear. All the underlines, they just disappeared, right? Practically, you don't want all the list items to be stuck to each other. What you want is, you want all the list items to have some sort of a gap between them. And in order for you to do that, there are many different ways you can achieve that. You can use margins, you can use paddings. In my case, I'm going to use a padding. So what I'm going to do, let me show you what I mean. First of all, let me give a background color to my link. So let me give background of let's say orange. Okay, something like this. So as soon as I give a background color of orange, you see that all the links, now it looks like a one single orange, but they are like 5 links, they are all stuck to each other. That is the reason you see it like this. What I can do now is I'm going to give it a margin right, because what I want is every list item, every element over here, or maybe not here. I want every list item to have a right margin, because this is first list item, second list item, third one, fourth and fifth. To every list item I want some kind of a margin on the right, so that there is a bit of a separation, there is a bit of a gap. So what I can do is I can come here and I can give margin right, and I will give it 5 pixels. You see, as soon as I gave it a margin 5 pixels, you see that now because of this margin, all the list items are separated, and inside all the list items I have the links, but links, you see, it still is kind of stuck completely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a padding to the links. I'm going to give it a padding of let's say 10 pixels top and bottom and 20 pixels on the sides. So I will give it a padding of 10 pixels top and bottom and 20 pixels left and right. Right? Now you see that all my links, they will start appearing like this. Looks good? Fine. I am also going to give it a property of display block. Okay, because by default all the links here, that means the anchor tags, they are the inline elements. But as soon as I give a property of display block, they become the block level elements. And when they become the block level elements, they will start accepting the properties like padding, the margin and all that. So this is one way of styling the links. So my main thing here I wanted to show you is all the list items. If I just remove the property display inline block, see what happens. If I just comment it out, you see that now all the list items are on their own single line. You see, first list item, second, third, fourth and fifth, they are all appearing in their own single line. Why? Because all the list items by default are the block elements. I don't really want this. I want them to become inline blocks so that they can appear next to each other. So I uncomment this line and I give it display inline block, and you see that now they are all appearing next to each other. This is one way, this is the first way to target this kind of a problem. But let's say for some reason, and you always have to remember that every time you use the display inline block, to the parent you have to specify the font size 0. And if you specify the font size 0, that weird gap that was appearing here, that weird gap will disappear. Okay, so now we will target this problem. Now we will look at this problem and try to use a different kind of a property to make the elements next to each other, to make the elements appear next to each other. So let's do one thing. Let's get rid of all of these styles again. Let's get rid of all the styles. Delete them. Now I am back to normal. So see that I just have my markup and I have no styles at all, and I am back to back to the default styles like how it was before. There is no styles applied to it. So what I am going to do is, first of all, I am going to get rid of these bullets. And now you know already how to get rid of the bullets is you go to the main UL, and UL has a class of main navigation. So I will type here dot main navigation, and I will give it a property, a style rule of list style none. As soon as I do that, you see that the bullets now they disappear. Fine. In this situation, in this case, I am also going to give it a background to the main navigation. So let me give it a background color of let's say aqua or something like this. You see, now to the main navigation I gave a background color of aqua, and what you see here is all the UL. This I gave it a background color on this element, that means the UL. So everything, it covers all the things, and everywhere the UL, this background color is applied. Perfectly fine, no problem. Why I am giving a background color? Because I want to demonstrate a problem that we will see later. How to resolve that issue also, we will see that. What I am going to do is Okay, let me give it a padding also. I will give it a padding of let's say 20 pixels. As soon as I do that, you see that now there is some padding on the top, padding on the left, padding on the bottom, and there is a padding on the right as well. But we are not able to see that right now. Since UL is a block element, so you see that the UL takes all the space that is available to it. So it will go from the extreme left of the browser to the extreme right. Fine. Now we will come to the list item. Okay, I have to style the list item. I can style the list item like li, and I can start writing my style here. That is perfectly fine, no problem. But in order for me to avoid any kind of a conflict, because when you are making a website, you might have 10 different types of LIs on the different parts of the page. So if you give a style rule of li just like this, it might happen that the style can get applied to all the list items that are present on the page. And in order to avoid that situation, you have to target the main parent element. So I am going to write dot main dash navigation and then li, right? I am going to give a style rule here. Before, in order to make the list items appear next to each other, I was using a property called display inline block. Now I am going to show you a new property, and this new property is called float. So I want all the list items to float next to each other. So I am going to give it a property of float left. As soon as I give it a property of float left, you see what happened, that all the list items are now floating next to each other, right? But let me also give some kind of a padding here. Padding, let's say 20 pixels of padding here, and I will also give a background of crimson. Okay, and fine, no problem. So you see, my problem is solved now. My problem was I wanted the list items to float next to each other, and this is exactly what I am doing here. I have given a padding of 20 pixels, I gave it a property of float left and the background of crimson. But now there is another problem. Why parent element is like floating like this? Why does it not contain my child elements, right? Because what happened is, you see this background color, the aqua. This aqua background color belongs to UL. That means the main navigation. I gave it a background color of aqua. And to my list item, I gave it a background color of crimson, right? So ideally, all the list items over here should be wrapped by the main navigation. So ideally, I should see that this aqua color should come down, should be pushed down and enclose everything what comes under this. But there is a problem here. As soon as I use the float left property, okay, the parent is going to collapse. So the parent element, in my case, it is the UL. So parent element will completely collapse. And in order for me to fix this problem, what I am going to do is I'm going to go here and write a style declaration. Okay, so I will write dot main navigation colon before comma dot main navigation colon after, and I will write content blank, and I will write display table. Okay, and I will copy this style declaration again, Control C. I will do an after, and I will give it a property here called clear both. You see what happened here? As soon as I gave this style declaration, okay, main navigation, my main navigation is UL. So I gave dot main navigation before, dot main navigation after. And in this, I gave it a content of blank and display of table. And at the same time, I gave dot main navigation after. I gave it a property of clear both. And that's it. Okay, you see that now my blue background of the parent, it is pushed down to expand and to wrap all the child elements that are contained within it. Okay, so we have to remember this property. Every time you use a float left property, this is the problem that we are going to encounter, and there is a very easy solution to it. And the fix is, you go to the parent element, you target the parent element and apply before and after, and give it an after rule again for clear both, and that's it. It will solve your problem. If it sounds very complicated to you, I know that it might sound very complicated to you, and at first it might be very difficult for a person to understand and to get the concept of why do I have to write these kind of styles. Even for me too, it was a problem in the beginning when I saw these style rules from so what I did is I never really understood what this whole thing was doing, so I just used to copy and paste it. And this is what exactly we have to do every time we are using a float left property. So that is the reason I am trying to avoid the usage of the float left property as much as I can, but it is also a very useful property. So in that case, if I have to use the float left property, all I have to remember is, if I am giving a float left property to the list item, so they all will start appearing next to each other without any problems. But my parent is going to collapse, and in order for my parent not to collapse, I have to give this style declaration, which is main navigation before, main navigation after, and then content blank, display table. And again, I have to give main navigation after and clear both. That's it. Applying this style rule will make sure that everything is okay and everything is fine, and we can then move ahead, no problem. So we see, until now, so far we have seen two different ways in which we can make the list items float or appear next to each other. The one is the display inline block, and in display inline block, you always have to remember that every time we use a display inline block on an element, to that parent element I have to specify a font size of 0. And the same thing here, if I'm using a float property, I have to give this sort of a declaration. And let's say for some reason you don't want to, this kind of a declaration or this kind of a style rule seems very complicated to you and you really don't want to use this. Okay, let's get rid of this. As soon as I get rid of this, you see what happened is my parent is still collapsed. It is not wrapping all the child elements as it should. In this kind of a situation, what I am going to do, I am going to go inside the UL where all the list items are floated, like list items here, here, here. Okay, I am going to come here and I am going to add a div. Either I am going to add a div or an li or something else. So let's say I add a div with a class of clear and end the div here. Okay, so I have all the list items that are floating. Okay, and under all the list items which are floating, I give a div, I add a div with a class of clear. And all I have to do, if you really don't want to write all those style declaration, what I can do is I can just come here and I can give dot clear, because I am targeting this particular div. Okay, and I can write here a style declaration called clear both, and you save it. This is also going to fix the issue. Now you might tell me, okay, this style declaration is much simpler than the one that I saw before. I agree, completely agree. But in the markup, it makes the markup look bad. Why? Because there is an extra markup that I am adding for no reason, and this extra markup is being added only so that I can clear the floating elements, and just so that my parent is not going to collapse. In order for me not to add the extra markup, what it does is basically it is kind of polluting the markup. I mean, I can still go with this kind of a markup, and this kind of a style declaration is completely valid. But the only reason I try to avoid using this kind of a thing is because it just adds an extra markup which I don't really want. In order for me not to add some kind of an extra markup, I just have to go with the older style declaration. Fine, no problem. So now we are going to see another way of how I can float, or I can make the list items appear next to each other. I saw number one, that is the display inline block. The second one I saw is the float left, and now I'm going to see a third one. Let's get rid of this clear div. Okay, now let's get rid of all the styles as well. Fine, now I am back to normal. Now I'm going to show you this time a super amazing style rule, which is a very new style rule that is introduced in CSS, and that is called as the flex. It is called as the Flexbox style rule. Okay, so the reason the Flexbox is amazing, the Flexbox is very good, and it is all supported in the most of the modern browsers, right? So I want all the list items here, all the list items to appear next to each other. What I can do here is I can just go to main navigation, that is my UL. So I can just type UL also, and I can write my style declaration here, or I can just write dot main navigation, and I can give a display value of flex. As soon as I do that, you see what happened. Let me get back. Let me first of all get rid of all the bulleted items here. Like you see all the small bullets that are present by default. Let me get rid of that. So what I am going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do list style none, and then I'm going to give it a display value, a display property of flex. As soon as I give it a display property of flex, that's it. You see, everything is working perfectly fine. So you see that this is the simplest property of all the three properties that I have seen so far, right? Let me do some experiments here again. Let me give my UL a background color, and let me give it a background color of orange red. Okay, you see what happened? I have a background color of orange red. I think it is like too sharp or something, but still I think it is kind of okay, not a problem. Okay, let me give it a height of, let's say, 200 pixels. Okay, so I have my UL, that is my main navigation menu. UL is the unordered list, and I gave it a background color, and I also gave it a height of 200 pixels. Fine. All my list items are appearing here on the top. So what I want is, first of all, let me style the list items, or let me style the A. So I will give dot main navigation, and I will give a style declaration for the A. So A is my link, so I am targeting all the links that are coming inside the main navigation menu. So all the links are here that are the child or the children of the main navigation menu, that is the UL. So this style declaration is going to target only the A's that are present here. Fine. So I'm going to give, first of all, I'm going to get rid of the underline. So I will give text decoration. I will call it none. So all the underline is disappeared, like all the underlines are gone now. I will give it a color value, color of white. So now all the text is white. I will also make it display block. Okay, all the list item, all the links here by default they are the inline elements. So what I want is I want to make them the block elements, and after making the block elements I can give some margins and paddings and everything. So I'm going to give it a padding of 10 pixels, 20 pixels, something like this. What does that mean is it is 10 pixels top and bottom and 20 pixels left and right, right? So let me also give some kind of a background to it or something. I give it a background of what kind of a background can I? Aqua. No, it is not looking that great. So let me give a background of red. That is also not looking very good. I think this orange red is like too sharp, so I will give it a aqua instead here, and I will give it a red here. Fine, no problem. Or maybe orange here. Orange red. Perfect, not a problem. So all my list items are now appearing like this. All the list items are appearing next to each other, and I also have my links which are styled, so they are all appearing like this. I also want some kind of a margin between my list items because they all look like they are stuck to each other. So the margin I can apply to the A also, to the links, but instead of applying the margin to the links, I will apply the margin to the list item instead. You see? So I am going to go here and I am going to apply the margin to the list item. But you will see that if I apply the margin just to the list item, it might happen that this list item styling is going to affect all the list on the pages. But I want it to be very, very specific only for this list item that appear in the main navigation. So I am going to give a style declaration of dot main navigation, and then li. I am going to give a margin right of 5 pixels, let's say. So you see that all my list items are now appearing perfectly fine as I wanted. What I want is I always want my list items, everything, like all the list items, to appear vertically in the center of this big box. You see, this is my main navigation. This is my UL. This blue colored background is my UL. And what I want is all my list items are appearing next to each other. That is perfectly fine. But I also want them to appear vertically in the middle here. In order to do that, what I am going to do is I am going to go to my main navigation, that is the parent element, that is the UL. And here I am going to give a property called align items, and I am going to write center. As soon as I give it align items center, you see that it automatically made all the list items appear exactly vertically in the middle of this box, right? If you also want the list items to appear here in the main center, like they are already appearing vertically centered, but you also want them horizontally centered. So in this case, there is a property called justify content and center. So you see that my list item is now appearing both horizontally and vertically centered inside the main navigation UL. So this is the third way of styling the list items. I showed you there are 3 different ways. The first one is display inline block, and display inline block has its own problems. So every time you are using a display inline block property, you have to remember to give to the parent a font size of 0. Now the another property that we saw was float left, and every time we are using a float left property, you always have to make sure that you have to clear the floating elements so that the parent is not collapsing. And this you can either do that by adding a div with a class of clear, or using the style declaration that I showed you in the previous part of the video. The third and the easiest property to style the list items is using the display flex, and display flex is one of the most recent properties that is introduced in CSS, and it is the most modern property, and right now it is being supported by all the modern browsers, so you can feel free to use it in your projects. So this tutorial is going to give you a concept about how to align the items, and now we can move ahead and we can go ahead and we can start styling the other part of the header. We can use or utilize the similar kind of a concepts that we learned in this particular video. We can move on to the next part of the video and we will see how we can continue with the styling of the header now.